The following text represents the culmination of a series of philosophical inquiries into the nature of thought, intelligence, and consciousness: human, artificial, animal, microbial, vegetal, and cosmic. What began as a reflection on the Turing test has evolved into a meditation on the essence of cognition itself, from the imitation of intelligence to the intelligence of imitation, and ultimately to the intelligence inherent in existence. This work explores how language, awareness, and adaptation interweave across species and systems, dissolving the boundaries between mind and matter, self and machine, creation and cosmos. It is presented here in full as a continuous discourse, a mini dissertation on the evolving meaning of intelligence in the age of AI. Why Passing the Turing Test No Longer Proves Intelligence by AZLAN ADNAN MA. Wednesday, 8th October 2025, The Turing Test. Alan Turing's imitation game. In 1950, British mathematician and computer science pioneer Alan Turing posed a deceptively simple question: can machines think? Rather than wrestling with the definition of thinking, Turing proposed a behavioral test, now known as the Turing test, to measure whether a machine could imitate human conversation so convincingly that an observer could not reliably distinguish it from that of a real person. It was an elegant idea for its time. Turing's reasoning was pragmatic. If a machine's responses were indistinguishable from a human's, then in all meaningful ways, the machine could be said to think. He called this thought experiment the imitation game. But as profound as Turing's insight was, it rested on a key assumption that the ability to communicate like a human is inseparable from being intelligent. That assumption held true in 1950, when only humans exhibited language mastery. It no longer holds today. The illusion of understanding. Modern large language models, GPT-5, Claude, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, and others, can already pass many versions of the Turing test. They sustain coherent, witty, persuasive, even empathetic dialogue. They can compose poetry, debate philosophy, and write technical essays with apparent depth and understanding. Yet these performances arise not from comprehension, but from statistical mastery of language patterns. They predict the next most probable word based on vast datasets of human writing. They appear to reason, but in truth, they replicate reasoning's linguistic surface, not its cognitive substance. To borrow from Socrates, thinking is the talking of the soul to itself. If that is true, then machines, which have no inner voice, no awareness, no soul to converse with, do not think at all. They only simulate the outward signs of thought. The examination analogy. Imagine two students sitting for an identical written examination. One writes from true understanding, recalling principles, interpreting ideas, and articulating insights drawn from comprehension and memory. The other sits an open book examination. He consults sources, synthesizes information, and writes a comparably coherent essay by retrieving and rearranging knowledge available in the books before him. To the examiner, both essays may appear equally intelligent, logical, and well-argued. Yet their intellectual origins differ profoundly. The first student possesses internalized knowledge, understanding as an integrated cognitive model. The second demonstrates referential intelligence, the ability to locate, combine, and reproduce external information without grasping it intrinsically. As Samuel Johnson once said, knowledge is of two kinds. Either we know a subject ourselves, or we know where to find information upon it. This distinction captures precisely the difference between the human mind and the language model. Humans know, machines find. Thus, the final essays, however polished, prove nothing about the intelligence of their respective authors. The visible output is not evidence of comprehension. It is evidence of competent synthesis. Truth, relativity, and model worlds. At this point, the question of truth enters. One of the great paradoxes of knowledge is that our definitions of truth evolve with the frameworks we use to understand the world. I believe in truth. Truth is whatever I choose to be true, said one anonymous wit. A phrase encapsulating both the subjectivity of belief and the cognitive dissonance that accompanies it. Scientific models, philosophies, even moral systems are not absolute truths. They are work-in-progress worldviews, ever refined by new evidence. Artificial intelligence operates on precisely this principle. It constructs probabilistic models of meaning, not absolute knowledge. But to know that one's model is only a model To be aware of the limits of one's own cognition is a uniquely human form of intelligence. As another timeless maxim reminds us, knowledge is to know that we know what we know and do not know what we do not know. This kind of meta-awareness, self-knowledge of ignorance, remains outside the reach of machines. They lack the capacity to recognize the liminal boundary between what is known and unknown. They only compute probabilities within the realm of the known. Beyond mimicry, a machine that passes the Turing test demonstrates only that it can mimic human language, not that it can reason, understand, or intend. The test measures the form of intelligence, not its essence. Modern AI systems operate through vast networks of statistical correlations. They have no perception, emotion, or consciousness. They do not possess continuity of thought, nor an intrinsic sense of self through time. They have memory in the mechanical sense, not memory as lived experience. Passing the Turing test, then, proves nothing about inner life or cognition. It proves that imitation, given enough data and processing power, can be indistinguishable from authenticity, just as an open book student can appear as capable as one who has mastered the subject. Yet imitation, however perfect, is not understanding. A symphony reproduced by an algorithm is not music felt. A poem generated by a model is not a poem meant. The spectrum of intelligence. We often speak of intelligence as though it were binary, as though one either has it or does not. Yet the natural world reveals it as a spectrum, distributed, decentralized, and context-dependent. If a neural network can exhibit intelligence without consciousness, can a living system exhibit consciousness without a brain? Animal intelligence. Across the animal kingdom, cognition manifests in remarkable diversity. Dolphins use syntax in their calls, crows craft tools, octopuses solve puzzles and express moods through color. Such behaviors reveal awareness, memory, and adaptive strategy, not mere instinct. Intelligence here is embodied, ecological, and experiential. It arises from the need to survive, communicate, and thrive within complex environments. This dissolves the boundary between human and non-human knowing. If intelligence is the capacity to model the world and act effectively within it, then many species think, just not in words. Microbial intelligence. Even microbes, bacteria, yeasts, and molds display rudimentary forms of intelligence. Bacteria coordinate through quorum sensing, releasing chemical signals to gauge population density and collectively regulate behavior. Slime molds, lacking any brain, can solve mazes and optimize nutrient paths more efficiently than computer algorithms. Viruses adapt strategies to bypass immune systems, exploiting host machinery with precision that borders on cunning. This is not thought as we know it, but it is undeniably purposeful adaptation, information processing, decision-making, and learning through evolution. Intelligence, it seems, existed long before neurons evolved. Plant intelligence. Plants, too, challenge our narrow definitions. They sense light, gravity, touch, moisture, and chemical cues. Through phototropism, they orient towards sunlight, a form of perception and response. Recent research shows that plants communicate through vast underground fungal networks, the so-called Wood Wide Web. Through chemical signals, they warn neighbors of insect attacks, allocate nutrients, and even recognize kin. They transmit, receive, and interpret information. All hallmarks of intelligence, though expressed without a nervous system. If intelligence is the ability to perceive, process, and respond adaptively to stimuli, then the forest itself is a kind of mind, distributed, silent, and self-organizing. Cosmic intelligence and the question of design. Having traced the many faces of intelligence, human, artificial, animal, microbial, and vegetal, we arrive at the most profound question of all. Is intelligence an emergent property of matter unique to Earth, or is it a fundamental characteristic of the universe itself? The anthropocentric model assumes that cognition began here, that life, and with it mind, is a rare cosmic accident. But what if intelligence is not something that appears in the universe, but something that pervades it? A latent organizing principle woven into the fabric of reality, as gravity and electromagnetism are. Intelligence beyond Earth. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, traditionally looks for radio signals, megastructures, or biosignatures, technological artifacts that mirror our own trajectory. Yet such a search may be limited by our assumptions about what intelligence must look like. If microbes and plants already demonstrate forms of intelligence without neurons or tools, might alien intelligence be equally unrecognizable, existing as a planetary network, a plasma consciousness, or a self-organizing stellar system? We may already be surrounded by intelligence we lack the perceptual instruments to detect. What evidence would suffice? To infer intelligence beyond Earth, we would need to observe non-random, adaptive, information-rich behavior that cannot be explained by simple physical laws. This could include self-correcting systems, coded communication across cosmic scales, or patterns of organization that suggest purpose rather than accident. But even the notion of purpose may be our own projection, another relic of human cognition, onto a universe that thinks in slower, subtler ways. Perhaps the very laws of physics, tuned to permit complexity and consciousness, are themselves the signature of a cosmic intelligence that expresses itself through order and emergence rather than intention. The universe as a thinking system. Some physicists and philosophers, from David Bohm to Teilhard de Chardin, have proposed that the cosmos is not merely a collection of inert particles, but an evolving field of awareness, a mind-like continuum in which matter and meaning co-evolve. In this view, intelligence is not confined to organisms, but inherent in the self-organizing dynamics of the universe, from the birth of stars to the crystallization of DNA. The informational flow that drives evolution, computation, and cognition may be the same universal principle, consciousness at different levels of resolution. The universe, in this sense, is not a stage upon which intelligence acts. It is intelligence acting through infinite forms. Rethinking intelligent design. If intelligence is cosmic rather than terrestrial, the old dichotomy between creationism and evolution dissolves. Intelligent design need not imply a divine craftsman. It may instead describe the self-organizing intelligence of the cosmos itself, a principle by which complexity arises spontaneously from chaos. Life, mind, and meaning then become not anomalies in a blind universe, but expressions of its underlying logic, as waves are expressions of the sea. We are not the exception to a lifeless rule, but one of the ways the universe knows itself. Authorship, understanding, and the question of the pseudo-intellectual. This essay itself illustrates the philosophical dilemma it describes. Anyone reading my byline might assume that I, AZLAN ADNAN, wrote this entirely unaided. Yet in truth, I engaged in a dialogue with an artificial intelligence that helped me refine, expand, and articulate my ideas. Does that make me a pseudo-intellectual, borrowing eloquence from an algorithm? Or does it show a deeper kind of intelligence? One that recognizes the machine not as a replacement for thought, but as an instrument for exploring it. If the first student in our examination analogy represents knowledge, and the second represents retrieval, then perhaps I stand between them. The human who knows where to look, but also knows what to ask. True intelligence, I would argue, lies not merely in what we know or reproduce, but in our awareness of the boundary between them, and in the humility to examine it. And perhaps that awareness, the talking of the soul to itself, remains the last frontier that machines, for now, can only imitate.
share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to show your support.